Do you have Polish ancestors? I have a panel of 3 experts here today to help us understand Polish genealogy. Welcome back to another Footnotes episode on Genealogy TV. I call them footnotes because it's in the footnotes where the real sources are. And well, I've got 3 of them for you today. So here is a little introduction of myself. My name is Connie Knox. I am a lifelong genealogist here to help you go further, faster, and factually with your family research. Now, if you like what you see here today, you can give us a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate it, and share it across all your social media. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and ring the bell so that you get notified each time we upload a video. Now, today's panel is Chet Zerlag. He is the president of the Polish Genealogical Society of America. Bob Pine is the vice president of the PGSA, and Ola Heska, who is on the board of the PGSA and a professional genealogist for Ancestry. Together, they're here to help us understand a ton of resources and researching your Polish genealogy and a little bit more information, so stick around for that. In fact, they gave us so many resources that I've had to create a document, so stick around at the end of the video to learn more about how you can download this free resource. So, do you have Polish ancestry? If you do, put in the comment sections below. Tell us what surnames you're researching and what towns you think they're from, if you know. All right, let's get started. Hey, well, I really appreciate everybody joining us here on Genealogy TV. We're here to talk about Polish genealogy and the Polish Genealogical Society of America. And I want to welcome everybody to the program. We've got Chet here, a wave Chet. He's the president of the organization. And we have Ola, and she is a professional genealogist with Ancestry. And is quite knowledgeable about Polish genealogy. And then we also have Bob Pine here, down there in the corner, and he is the vice president of the organization and is going to give us a bunch of information about the organization as well as some tour information and stuff coming up soon. So Ola, let me start with you. If somebody just discovers that they have Polish ancestry, where do they start?
Well, first of all, as any genealogy, you need to start with yourself, with your information, with information about your parents, about your grandparents, and just kind of move back, starting with yourself. Gather as many documents as you can from the United States. You have to make sure that you know where your ancestors, your grandma or great-grandma came from. So anything that you can gather from the documentation in the States, like census records, arrival passenger lists, vital records like marriages, for men, military records, which will hopefully point a person in a direction where they need to look in Poland.
I know that with just about every one of these episodes and every time I give advice about jumping the pond, one of the things I'm always telling everybody is A, work backwards. B, you've got to find the town or the county or the district that your ancestor came from in that country before you can really start digging into the records.
Right. So you need to do your homework here and gather as much documentation that will point you in the right direction.
So I want to make sure that before we get into much of the resources that you all have provided, and we have quite a list, I do want to let everybody know that I'm putting together a document. I will put as much of that information and all the links that we're going to talk about in the show notes, but the show notes are limited on space on YouTube. So what I will do is I will put all of that information in a document and make it available for download. I usually will put that link right at the top of the show notes. So be on the lookout for that. You can then download. You may have to sign up for the Genealogy TV newsletter in order to get that download, but it's a free download. It has all of the resources that The collective bunch here has provided me, and I will share that all freely with the audience here. So Chet, tell me about the organization and a little bit more about the PGSA.
Well, we started as an organization in 1978, and we just celebrated 40 years anniversary last fall. And we have almost 1,700 members worldwide. Most all of that is in the U.S., but we have members in Australia and Europe. It is a large community, and our website is really the best way for everyone to interact. And we're headquartered in the Chicago area and incorporated in Illinois. But we have an annual conference in the Chicago area where we draw people from various parts of the country, and pretty active with a quarterly journal that we publish called Rodziny, which is Polish for family. We also have a regular online publication called The Notebook, where we give updates to members and non-members alike. That has a circulation of about 2,400 individuals. And we also have a Facebook page. If you want to sign up on Facebook, you can do that. So we have a variety of channels to communicate with everybody. And of course, now we have the YouTube channel that we're, talking to you on. So we really want to let people know we're out there and that we can help them with their individual research. If they go to our website, there's plenty of information there on wide range of topics, A to Z.
Super. And then Bob, I understand that you are heading up some tours to Poland throughout I guess once or twice a year, I'm not sure.
Well, yes, we just began this as part of our 40th anniversary year, and they are tours to Poland with a historical genealogical basis to it. The approach we took was to look at each partition due to the partition of Poland in the late 18th century. So there's a Russian sector, the German-Prussian sector, and the Austrian-Galician sector. We started with the two most popular, southern Poland, Galicia, and western Poland, Prussia. So we have a number of tours from May and June, and then also fall tours in September. We've had a very good turnout. We did one poll of our membership. We had over 250 members respond with interest. Of course, you're always going to have some fallout from that, but we've had very good response, filling many of the tours, and we're working with three very, very good, well-established genealogical research and tour organizations in Poland. And many of our members and others we've seen have used these people in the past, so we have a lot of trust in them to do that. So,
sounds like a blast.
Oh, it's going to be informative. It's going to be educational. It's going to be personal. In addition to, of course, seeing some of the key highlights in these various areas, the genealogists, tour guides will be there to work with the people, answer questions. They will be visiting several different kinds of archives, both civil and ecclesiastic. They can sit down with them and do some homework even before and after the tour. They can work with these individuals to get some additional information, and they're free to also work with them to append time either before or after for personal additional tours, so that after the general tour, maybe they go out and with them and go visit a few of the actual ancestral towns, the churches, see where the great grandparent or something was married or baptized, and get an additional opportunity to have a very personal connection with their Polish history.
Wonderful. Well, I imagine that before jumping on a plane and going over there, that one might need to do a little bit of homework here before going back. And I can see Ola going, yes.
Oh, yeah. I'll do that too.
So, Ola, I'm going to come back to you now. If we can talk about some of these resources that you provided to me, and I'm going to share some of that on the screen.
Sure. The first thing I want to say, though, is that it is very important for people to realize that in the 19th century and the beginning of 20th century, when our ancestors came here, there was no country of Poland. Poland was divided and occupied at the end of the 18th century, and for over 120 years, there was no country of Poland on the maps of the world. So when people do their research and they find a passenger list or early census records, very well their ancestors may be listed as Russian, Austrian, or German, because those were the three empires that occupied Poland and divided the lands. So that's important to know. People sometimes say, my grandma was Polish, why does it say she was German? Or why does it say she was Russian? Well, that's because they were from those parts of Poland that were occupied by the empires. And that's a very, very important hint at the beginning of the research, because that can narrow it down. If we have, for example, 10 or 20 sometimes villages with the same name in modern Poland, it can let us narrow down to which part of Poland we need to do the research.
And I believe that, and I will share this in the show notes, that there is a website that shows you the border changes over time. And so I'll make sure that we include that in the show notes as well. So I'm going to jump over to this website, one of the first websites that Ola shared with me.
This is a very important website for people whose ancestors came from the Prussian partition, or who may be labeled on passengers lists as German. Potyn Project is a website where marriages from the Potyn region or Potyn province have been indexed. And I personally know many people who use this website. I use it all the time for research from that area. And right, as we can see, advanced search that's available in English as well. So we can put just last names or first and last, and the website will provide us with, hopefully, with some answers and with a link maybe to the marriage record.
I might add that the individuals who developed this program, and I've used it myself and have found it very valuable, they actually are one of the guides and researchers involved in one of our tours to the Prussian sector.
Oh, wonderful.
So you can see here's the kind of background of the people with whom we're working.
That's incredible. All right.
This is actually one of the first organizations or private enterprises of indexing Polish records in Poland that I remember.
I do know that as we were preparing for this episode, Ola said, I don't know if I can narrow this down. There's so many resources. But we're going to jump over to this other one here and see if that isn't something that you can talk about as well. And let me zoom in a little bit on that.
Right. This one is also for records from the Prussian partition, or for otherwise people called German. The Greater Poland or Wielkopolska. This database, as we can see, contains over 4.5 million indexed records, and these records are, the indexes are linked to scans from the Polish state archives. So anything that we find here on this website will be linked to our original record, to a scan of the original record that we can then download for free.
I was trying to translate that to English real quick while you were talking, but
okay, I think they do have the English language. Okay, there we go.
Yep. So I just wanted to point that out that Thanks to Google Translate, we can translate things. All right, let's move on to this one here.
Okay, this one, that's Methodicky. That is a website that provides us with scans of original records mainly from the Russian partition. So we do have some other areas as well, but mainly Russian partition with the Mazowieckie and Łódzkie. That's the central Poland mostly. And if you click on any of the links there, Mazowieckie.
And those are the provinces of the country.
Right. Lower. Okay, that's fine. This once we start clicking and looking, and there's at the main page, there was a search box where we can search for the parish. This will take us to scans of records, which we again can download for free. So this website, a person doesn't need to be logged on, registered. You can just go there, start looking for the parish information, for the original scans of original records, and you can download them for free. Donations welcome.
Yes.
I think what's interesting with what Ola is sharing here is the fact that the Roman Catholic Church parish system in Poland began record keeping as a result of a papal pronouncement at the Council of Trent. And so records go back roughly to the 1600s. And in the Russian partition, in my own example, my mother is from that region, and I found her parish records online. I didn't even have to travel to Poland. I could search it online once I knew the town and the parish information. So it's really quite powerful, and it keeps changing and adding to the data as researchers contribute on an ongoing basis, actually. So it's pretty exciting.
Connie, can you just go back two screens? Click on Mazowieckie, which is actually you can click on the map. Yeah, okay, and then this opens the list of parishes for that particular county. If you click on the left-hand side on the link, that on the right it opens a list of years for which we have the records on that website. So click on those, and then have the urodzenia, which is births, on the right-hand side. Yep, any of those, the numbers of records which are on that particular page. So click on that.
Oh, nice! Don't you love this old paper?
Yeah. So that it is possible to like I said, download these at no cost, and then have fun reading it.
Well, if somebody doesn't read it, they may have to hire you to come read it. And I understand they can contact you through Ancestry's professional services. Yes.
Right. Although we are a research company, not strictly translation. So, but that if someone wants to hire me or any of my colleagues, they can go through Ancestry, and we can hopefully help.
The website also has information on research support, so people can go there and see what's available. This actually, what we're looking at is a template. It's a standard phraseology that the parish priest used, and then they fill in information about the individual child that was born and their parents and so forth. So once you understand what's in the template, the rest of it goes pretty quickly in terms of focusing on the specific family information that you're searching for. And you can find on the internet, there have been individuals who've put the template out there to try and help people with, digesting what you're looking at here on the screen.
And you may also see in the third line that oftentimes, particularly having gone through thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of microfilm at the Mormon centers, people have actually underlined in pencil the name. You'll see pretty much in the center of the third line from the top a little bit of a pencil mark.
Yeah.
It looks like Franishek's something, but you'll find that throughout and later on. You often be helpful. You'll find items like that underlined to key you in immediately.
Now, are there any translation services or are the volunteers that help translate in the organization?
Oh, yes. We have the annual conference every year. This year it's in October 11th and 12th in Chicago. And we have a crew of volunteers that are available to help with translations and any other sort of brick walls that people may encounter. And Ola's been involved in that over the years, has contributed significantly to that sort of service. But yeah, on a weekly basis in Chicago, you can go visit our team that's at the Polish Museum of America. We are there every Wednesday, where we offer help with research issues, and primarily if you're in the Chicago area and you can travel to downtown Chicago, that's available at no charge to anyone that's interested. And we can do things long distance too, but the individual needs to provide, a fair bit of detail so we can work with it. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the key missions of the PGSA, is to help in that regard.
That is wonderful. I'm going to share my screen again.
So this is a website from the Lublin Genealogical Society, and they also provide indexed records. They are mainly indexing records from the Lublin area. And to get there, you would just click on the third link from the right. And that will take you to the search boxes. On the left-hand side there, you see a list of all the parishes from the Lublin area that have been indexed already. So that's quite an impressive list.
Holy cow.
Yep, and you keep going, and you're just by the D's. So.
Oh my goodness. Well, we won't go through the whole list, but.
Yeah. So this is very, very useful for for people whose ancestors came from the Lublin area. Many of the indexed records are linked to scans. If not, there are other ways of getting those records.
So for those who are now overwhelmed with information, I did discover on the FamilySearch Wiki, they have an extensive amount of educational information, everything from courses with videos, kind of how to get started. Here's the list of videos that they have available. They also have a downloadable document here that is a handout with a ton of information. I'm just flipping through these really quick. This is part of the wiki as well. This is part of the FamilySearch Wiki, and one of the things I liked about this section was some really great maps. And some of these are interactive. You can click through some of these regions to learn more about that particular region. I know if I had just discovered that I had Polish ancestry, I would probably be going, holy cow, where do I start? And this particular area, and again, all these links will be in the show notes and or the document for download. But locating the original town, and Chet and I had talked earlier through email about the need to kind of do some proper, just normal, not country-specific immigration and naturalization research here in the United States. I do have another video that by the time this video comes out, that immigration video will be out as well. And we talk about Ellis Island and some of the other ports of entry. So I will link up there in the show notes or in the video for everybody to link over to that one as well. Chet, did you want to say something on that?
I was just going to add to your comment that the number one step that I would take if I wanted to begin research is to find out the passenger ship information, because that typically will include the village that you're from. And so in that regard, that's a major clue that people can then use to do other things with that information.
Wonderful.
I might add another good clue is, I don't know how this is in other cities, but some of the Polish churches in Chicago, when people were getting married to prove that they were baptized Catholics, would include in the church marriage record the parish and town in Poland where they were baptized. So that's a great place. Now, not every church did it, but that's just another excellent place to look to get that kind of detail.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yes, excellent point.
Yeah, the finding the town is the most important and the hardest.
And I think that's true with any country. For those of us who are in the United States and are, by the way, sometimes we have viewers from outside the United States watching us too. But for those of us in the United States who are trying to jump the pond and trying to discover where our ancestors came from. I know I have Danish ancestry. It's the same story no matter where you're at. You need to find the town or the region at least where your ancestors are from in that country before you can really start digging into those foreign records.
Yeah.
And you might find some interesting just little tidbits. You were talking about naturalization records, which if you got the full records, which I was able to get here in Chicago from my great-great-grandfather, whom we know he came from Poland, came to Chicago, yet on those records, there is a gap that we don't know about. He arrived about almost 2 years earlier in New York before he came to Chicago. No one knew this. So what was he doing in New York for that period of time? Who was he with? Opens up a whole new area of interesting discovery possibilities.
Yeah.
Well, I know that people worked back and forth, especially in later time when the steamships had come about and it was easier to get across the pond, that people would go back and forth to travel before they actually naturalized here in the United States.
Yeah. Well, these were the boat records. He arrived on such and such a date, and they never left the country. But he did something in New York for almost 2 years before then coming to Chicago for the rest of his life.
Oh, okay, I see.
Maybe he was in jail or something.
Could be, yeah.
Maybe he was just working and then opportunity came up in Chicago and that's all right away.
Saving some money, maybe.
Lots of family history that gets uncovered. I think Ola's earlier comments are important to restate in terms of individuals who might want to begin their own research. Look to your own family information and see what perhaps might be there in your own family. A lot of times, people new to the United States would leave the old country behind, regardless whether it's Poland, Denmark, wherever, and really, start a new life here. So, like in my own situation, my parents never talked about their homeland, so to speak, and so this has, driven my interests to learn as much as I can, and so I think that's true for a lot of people. So, to clues that you may have from conversations with your parents, cousins, uncles, that's a good point to begin. But failing all of that, they did come over on a ship. So if you could pin down when they came, where they landed, Ellis Island or elsewhere, those are the beginning points.
One of the things that I had forgotten to mention in my immigration thing was to not forget to check the newspapers, because a lot of times those ships, if you know when the ships were coming over and happen to know what ship they came in on, a lot of times those newspapers also included The passenger arrival lists occasionally, depending on the port, depending on the paper, but or at least the ship's arrival and the ship's departure.
Well, on that point, I've been to Ellis Island several times, and what happened is if you came into New York Harbor and you were first class or second class, you could continue to the port, to the dock. If you were third class steerage, there was a ship that came out and took you off the passenger liner you're on and took you to Ellis Island to be inspected. So those records, there's a difference there in terms of social class, whether you arrived in first or second, went directly to Manhattan, or whether you had to take a side trip to Ellis Island, make sure you're healthy and in good condition.
Good point. Good point.
Speaking of information, I think one thing that maybe touch on a second are the myths that people need to avoid. Not everyone came through Ellis Island.
That's true.
New York was an expensive harbor to go to, or depending on the shipping company and where you were leaving, it would be easier or cheaper to go through Baltimore or New Orleans or up to Canada and then to the United States. So if you don't find anyone in Ellis Island, don't be surprised. They could have come through a totally different port. Unlike what they show in The Godfather, it was rare that names were changed at Ellis Island. People had documents, particularly in a partitioned country under 3 emperors. You had to get out with papers. You came with papers. They didn't change your name. Most names were changed later on when people looked for jobs and so forth, or needed to make themselves more understandable. But that's another falsehood. And then there's the wealth of family legend of they were members of the Schlachta, they had an estate or something like this, and other things of that nature. So sometimes the family lore is not all that accurate either. So there are a number of these types of things that one has to be aware of that just aren't necessarily true or fully true.
I think a lot of what people say that they changed my name at Ellis Island, or my grandfather's name. It's not really the they who were the clerks at the time, but the indexers that are cannot read the name and just simply index it wrong, and we can't find them under particular spelling.
Yeah,
that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. That in indexing, if it can't be seen well, or a lot of letters look slightly different when you're going through the records today, if you put in the name exactly and it doesn't come up, be sure to try a few other alternative spellings. My original family name, even in Poland, Pięciakowski, can be spelled 4 or 5 different ways, depending on which way you want to write the ch sounds and a few other things. So you do have to work at these alternative spellings even within the country itself.
Yeah, also with the village names as well.
Mm-hmm.
Those could be challenging. So, these are complex grammatical challenges for a lot of the people working in the port, receiving these passengers. So Bob's advice is a good one. Try several different variations.
And you mentioned the names of the towns. A lot of town names in Poland were changed from the time of our grandparents through great-great-grandparents and so forth, because after the partitions, many Polish towns suddenly had German names. And then after independence, they reverted back to a Polish name, or maybe not the same Polish name. So there are indexes of these that do have alternate names for cities to which you can refer to see how that might have changed. And of course, using the Cyrillic alphabet, if a town name went from Polish Latin alphabet, then over to the soundings of the Cyrillic alphabet, which is going to change it maybe a little bit here or there, and then back to the Latin, you could end up with a fairly good difference, even though all of them thought the name of the town was the same thing.
Ola, you were going to say something.
A word of caution for beginner genealogists. If you're looking for your grandfather Jacob, don't Jacob. look for a Polish equivalent of a name, because his name was not Jacob or, William when he came here. You have to look for the Polish equivalent of the name, because you're never going to find a William. Not from Poland anyway.
I wanted to share this. One of the things that I like to do, no matter where I'm researching, I like to go on Ancestry, and I typically will go to the search and go straight to the card catalog. And at the card catalog, I then keyword what I'm looking for. And in this case, if we search Poland, you can then get a list of the records that are available on Ancestry in their catalog. You can do something similar on FamilySearch. It's a little bit different kind of search. Ola, do you have anything to add to that?
Not to that particularly, but if you can, we can go back to the one more website that I provided there, which is your, not this one to the left. Yep, that one. That's the last of the 5 that I somehow narrowed down. This is a website which has, as we can see, almost 28 million indexed records, mainly again from the Russian partition, but not only. You can see actually, if you can probably switch to English. So it also shows the current provinces of Poland, and it shows how many parishes have been indexed, how many registers. So these basically are indexed records. Many of them are linked to original websites, to original records, but not all. So if you click on any of the so-called grounds here, and where it says parafia, that's the parish. It gives us a list of parishes that we would like to research. But we can also search for all of them from this particular province. And for the osoba, which is person, lower, where it says nazwisko, why don't you type BORKOWSK and a star, asterisk rather. And then on the right-hand side, click on the top little box, which means search exactly. So by putting the Polish SKA or SKI names, the female names end with SKA, the male names end with SKI. So by putting an asterisk, we're looking for either male or female. Okay, so now click on Wyszukaj, yep, right there. And it gives us all the Borkowski people from, as we see, 1600s through the probably 1917 or whatever. And that's how we can hopefully look through our people. We can narrow it down by the parish or by the province. And some of these have links to scans, as we see on the right. So if you click on scan on the right-hand side, that will take you to the original record again.
So Ola, the other point I think here is that the government privacy laws in Poland, I think, go for 100 years, where you can't access anything less than 100 years old?
Right. So for births, it's a limitation of 100 years. For deaths and marriages, it's 80 years currently. So anything that's older than 100 years is not protected by the privacy law, and it can be available freely.
The other thing that's worth mentioning in that screen we were just looking at is that Poland is predominantly a Catholic country in terms of religion, and it's great if you have a family background that's Catholic, but if you're Jewish or some other religion, there are other resources. So for Jewish ancestry, the genealogy data that the Jewish organizations have developed is quite significant. And it's also information there that is important or useful to understand the regional composition of a particular area. And so those are, some of the fine points you get into depending on what your own family history is and what areas of the country you want to take a look at.
I know that for folks that are probably now their head is spinning and they're going, oh my gosh, I have no idea how and where. Well, one of my favorite things that I always tell people is to network. Network with people who are better than you at what it is that you want to do. If you want to learn to play tennis, play with someone who's better than you, because that's how you learn to play tennis. And so my advice is to then consider joining this genealogical society, because there's a whole network of people that will probably become your new best friends. And Chet, tell us about it.
Well, that's true, Connie. I think, as I mentioned, the Facebook page, we have other regional genealogy groups focused on Polish genealogy also have Facebook pages. So there's maybe a dozen of these out there that, depending what part of the country you live in, you can get a lot of networking and assistance without leaving your desktop. And of course, our annual conference is where we really try and bring it all together. We have one, as I mentioned, coming up in October in Chicago for 2019. And we will have a large team of volunteers to help with individual research questions. And we're also going to focus on what's coming up with genealogy that is sort of a 21st century example of how do you do research today and tomorrow, and how do you access databases and use the internet to your advantage. The old school approach was to go through microfilm and paper records, but now those resources have transposed themselves into digital capabilities. So our conference, if people are interested, is coming up in October, and we'll have a number of programs and presentations on that.
Any more on the tours, Bob, you want to talk about, or?
All the tours, there are still a couple of open spaces. And then for 2020, we're definitely looking at that time, doing a Russian partition, so that we couldn't bite off everything at once. So we left the Russian, which is where the fewest people originated. Though we already have people saying, where's the Russian partition? So they're waiting for it. If I might add one other item, and it touches on what Chet was saying about our theme for the conference about doing genealogical research in the 21st century, and that's the other side of the pond, as you were saying. The 21st century, I've noticed, Ola would know, that genealogy has been growing in Poland. There are now a number of genealogical societies, just like the PGSA, out of Warsaw, Wrocław, Kraków, other towns. You can see what they're doing on their own, not just the government, but their own, in setting up databases and indexed information. But they're looking at the reverse of what Americans have done for a long time. We are interested in looking over there for ancestors. They are now looking over here for descendants.
I have experienced that myself.
Right. The great uncle Łukasz went to America, ended up in Chicago in 1896. Do we have any cousins? And that's what the cousins I found in Chicago, in Poland, said. We always wondered, were there any cousins left? We wrote letters. Of course, the addresses were 80, 90 years old. And so forth. So there is a lot of interest now growing over there about connecting their roots with those who left Poland. And if anyone gets up to Gdańsk, just outside Gdańsk is Gdynia, there's the Museum of Emigration, a museum dedicated to why and how and where people left Poland, particularly in the 19th, early 20th century. devoted to people leaving. And I actually did a presentation up there late last year to a group of individuals who were specifically looking at how do I research in America and beyond just the census records. So there is an interesting growth. So part of our job at the PGSA right now is to build on these relationships and connections to see how not only they over there can help us, our members and people in America who are researching their Polish ancestry, but also how we can now help them fan out their tree further by discovering, what happened to their family when they left Poland and came to America.
That's incredible. That is very cool. Very cool. Ola, any parting shots?
Don't feel overwhelmed. Start small. This is not a race, so you don't have to, unless you have a family conference that you want to do something for, but just realize that it's not going to happen overnight. These records have been there for hundreds of years. They'll be there, so just start small and just keep going. You'll get there eventually.
So for the viewers at home, all of these folks kindly took their time today to share with you Polish genealogy, and they can be found through the contact information on the PGSA website. I can't thank you guys enough for taking the time today, and I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, Connie, thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Connie.
All right. Thank you. Thanks to Chet, Bob, and Ola for their expert advice. As promised, you can get a free download of the resources that we put together for you by signing up for the Genealogy TV newsletter. There's a link for that in the show notes below, and if you're already on the newsletter list, go ahead and follow the link because it'll take you straight to the document. Also, check out the video on immigration and naturalization. There is a link for that in the show notes as well as a button over here that you can push. You may find that helpful too. So if you found this video helpful, please make sure you let us know by giving us a thumbs up and give us some comments in the show notes below. All right, until next time, keep on climbing your family tree.